Thanks, Pete. We'll just get everyone's attention here. My name is Heinz Inabnit with Sancon Commissioning. Thanks for coming here today. This is the last presentation for ourselves for the conference. What we're going to be talking about today is defining commissioning scopes using a responsibility matrix, or a RACI as they might be called. So a little bit about myself. With Sancon Commissioning, Chief Development Officer at Sancon. Sancon Commissioning is a commissioning and startup specialty firm based here in Calgary with a North American footprint. We will slide on to the next slide here, Pete. So this is a series that we've actually presented in the past, and it's a bit of an educational series that we use. And it's essentially, how do we define our scope using a responsibility matrix or a RACI? Next slide. So the problem we see in the project world is lack of clear definition when it comes to specific activities within the project scope, or particularly commissioning or turnaround scopes of work. So what happens here is we result in duplication of work or missed scopes of work. So either we have multiple contractors completing the same tasks, or scopes of work get missed, which can have, extreme cost delays, personnel issues, equipment damage. So why is this important? We're going to look here today and we're going to talk about the work scope responsibility. So at the end of the day, it's not so much as pulling scope under one party, but defining the scope of work and ensuring that those scopes of work are being covered by all the parties in the project. So solution. What we've used in the past, and it's the number one thing that we do when we enter a project, is using that responsibility matrix. We need to develop that project responsibility matrix and execute that throughout the project. And this is a life cycle document. This starts at the front end planning feed stage and runs right through to operational readiness and operational startup. So how do we do this? How do we implement a RACI into a project? What we do here is we take a project, and it doesn't matter the type or the style of project, but we're going to define the activities for that specific scope of work in the project. We're going to define the teams responsible, so we're going to understand who our construction contractors are, who our vendors are, who are our operational teams and our operational support projects, and we're going to define the different groups that are going to be part of the responsibility matrix. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look at that responsibility matrix, and we're going to actually define the roles of each department or personnel within the project. So covering a lot right there, and I will hold maybe questions to the end, but in that first quick piece here, is there anything that really stood out for questions from the definition of why we want to bring a responsibility matrix into the project? That's all right. I'll save your questions for the end too. It's all good. So next slide here is we're gonna look at a RACI, and we're gonna actually build out a small piece of a responsibility matrix here. So what we've done here is, you can see on the screen, we have essentially some electrical scope of work. So we have our planning services, so we know our field execution duties, our cable tray installs, heat tracing, lighting, MCC switchgears, UPS charger stations, motors, and this can be tailored to fit any project. So this is an editable document, and as we start building the process out, we want to build this to a very finite detail. As you can see here, it's not just commissioning as one box in a schedule that says 30 days. We're trying to actually define very defined groups of activities within disciplines. So we have our electrical scopes of work here. We have our different departments. We have our construction contractors, our commissioning contractors, our operational teams, any project management and engineering. So whether it's oversight, governance, execution, we want to define the specific roles that are going to be completing. So who's responsible? What might be a witness point for operations to see? What's going to be, who's accountable? Who's going to consult and inform on these different specific tasks within the RACI? So, and a RACI can be as high level or as low level as required. We might have, it's 200 line items on a responsibility matrix, or we might have 15. It's really scalable to the size of the project. Next slide, Pete. So we look at our RACI, and again, we're sticking with the electrical theme here. So we have, further break down these equipment components into specific tasks. So we have an MCC, for an example. We want to break down the responsibility matrix of that MCC. We're going to have, installation of electrical equipment, our installation resistance testing, torquing of the bus bars. Again, we're trying to be as detailed as possible in this responsibility matrix because we don't want to duplicate work that might have been done in a mod yard, might have been done by a vendor, or missed completely because nobody, we thought construction was doing it, commissioning thought construction was doing it, vice versa. So we want to make sure that the different activities here. You can see we have 12 different activities related to one specific piece of the project. All these different activities have different responsibilities, supports, accountables, witness, hold points within the scope of work. So we go to the next slide, Pete. We're going to talk about here, so here we go into a little bit more on the planning side of things. So, we're talking about red line services, the permit to work process, LUN, livening up notice is what that stands for, the permitting, red lines, RFIs. We want to talk about all these different procedures that come within the process. It's not just technical from a field execution level. We're getting into the process side of the responsibility matrix as well. So within the planning service, our scheduler, who's responsible for updating the schedule? Which contractors are updating which portions of that project? Who's responsible for red lines at this time? Is it pre-turnover construction is managing red lines? We switch into turnover to the commissioning contractor. Now that responsibility gets shifted. These are clear things that should be defined in the responsibility matrix, so we know who's responsible, who's ultimately responsible for turnover, care, custody of as-built drawings of a project. And this is taken back to, we talked about early works and earlier on in the series here this week, we talked about the benefits of early works. Well, early works is the key, is defining that within the responsibility matrix. So when we're talking about FAT tests and we're talking about vendor mod yard commissioning, this needs to be identified in the responsibility matrix. So now I'll just get you to go to 2 slides here. We'll skip through the questions, Pete. Next piece we want to identify is the teams, and let's talk about the teams a little bit more. This is, again, is edible. You can add as much detail to the teams as you want. We might have multiple construction contractors per area within a project. So when we have different areas of a project and we have different construction contractors, let's identify those construction contractors so that we know who's responsible for which areas of the facilities, which vendors might be required as part of the teams. We might have multiple commissioning scopes broken out by different commissioning contractors, whether the vendor's doing some of it, the construction contractor is responsible for some pre-com activities. We really don't care who's doing it so much as we don't want to duplicate these tasks and we don't want to miss the tasks. And just for like a bit of a knowledge, we see often that as a minimum we see 3 teams, and we see them up as eight or more. So we can keep it as low as we want, with probably a minimum of 3, and then as many as 8 or more. So when we look at this a little bit deeper, I mean, the big things we're looking for here is obviously, our construction, commissioning, operations, our quality groups, asset integrity, the project management team, our engineering contractors. They all have a stake in this, and so this is a governing document for the project, and it really clears up. When we talk commissioning, we often say it's the quarterback of the project. It's trying to bring all the entities together, and what we want to do here is we want to ensure that all the team members know what they're responsible for, and there's clear definitions of what these different teams do and the impacts that they have. We'll go down 2 slides here. Okay, we'll spend a little bit of time here at the top and talk about the legend. And this is, again, has different project definitions. And essentially that's why a legend is so key with these documents. Is the industry's full of acronyms, and everyone has a different opinion on what acronyms mean. So I'm a big proponent on you need to have a legend for your acronyms. And you can use this however you like, but in this case we're using this acronym of responsible, witness, hold, spot witness, which is not a hold point, accountable, consult, and inform. Now, with this legend, it's key that these get held within the project, and parties, there might be several responsibilities within a project and several holds, but we need to have it clearly defined across the map. And this is a team exercise that gets done at the start of the project, during the planning phase of the project. This isn't something we want to execute, 60% through construction completion. This is a pre-feed document that should be done pre-IFC. The next slide. So we're going to look here again. One more slide, Pete, maybe? Or I think if you click, there might be they might put some check marks on. There we go. There'll be a few check marks. So when we look at these, let's actually look at the document. So here, again, back to the MCC. So we're talking electrical, we're talking an MCC section. Who's going to be responsible for the electrical equipment? So construction is responsible for the installation. The installation resistance test is going to be completed by construction and spot witnessed by the commissioning team. Now we're killing two birds with one stone. Construction's already in there. We're not going to duplicate the task by commissioning coming in there, redoing the installation test. We're going to witness this. We're not taking pieces of equipment apart twice. We're not getting hands in the way. We're being more effective and efficient, and we're not duplicating tasks. We continue along the list here. We'll see torquing of the bus bar, DLRO testing, preservation of electrical equipment, programming and testing of the electrical equipment, energization, installation of arc flash labels, and laminations of the single line drawings in the MCC. So we're putting a lot of detail into this. This is essentially part of our commissioning plan being put into a responsibility matrix. When this is completed, essentially we have our project definition in place. We know the scopes of work for the project with regards to construction, commissioning, quality, operations. This is really a ready for operation and an RFO documentation that should be implemented at the start of the project. So that's a quick and very high level overview of responsibility matrix, but I guess after that I'll open the floor. Is there questions about defining a responsibility matrix, issues with it, how it gets implemented in the project, or any other kind of questions from today?
So not so much, I understand the defining part. I'm interested in compliance enforcement.
Absolutely.
You showed me a list that these people are responsible, but now the work's supposed to be done. What's your strategy?
That's a really good question, is because that's where there has to be buy-in, and that's where early engagement in the responsibility matrix is key. And that's why I said, this isn't something we implement into a project at 60% construction completion. This almost goes out as part of an RFP, out of that initial work CWP packages that are being issued to contractors for bidding of scope of work. They need to have a clear understanding what the responsibilities are before they take a contract in hand. I mean, as we bid projects, as we're executing projects, we need to know what parties are what's being completed under what party's entity. So when it comes to the compliance, I mean, this is a document that says, who is responsible for, the LTO? Well, the engineering team is responsible for the LTO. What point did they have to be involved in the project to hit our LTO?
So follow-up question. I see you're mostly using groups, like the engineering group, like you said, and you're making them the responsible party. Do you ever put the person's name in there instead, or would that be the other team?
I think that we haven't seen it leveled to like an individual person. I mean, if the project was of a size that you could name them, that would be one thing, but it should be at a group level, because that group would then accountable for their team to execute it. Any other questions from the crowd? If not, you guys, my contact information is on the board. By all means, reach out to me, come see me at the booth, talk after. Thanks for having me here today.